Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Rangers Reviews pre-match briefing. It's the final game of pre-season. Myself, Joshua Barrie, here with Chris Jack, who has made his way to Berlin for today's game. Going to have full coverage of the game as per usual. Also hear from Philippe Clement after on what looks set to be a busy week for Rangers. Chris, lots to talk about. We'll get into the team straight away. You said to me before we came on air, this might be the team. Do you think that Rangers play at Tynecastle? I'd hope there'd be a couple of changes in it by then, but let's get into today's team that Rangers will use to face Union Berlin. To start with, Rangers go with Jack Butland in goals, a back four of James Tavernier, John Souttar, Ben Davies and Chefty, Conor Barron and Mohamed Diomande in the middle. Tom Lawrence is just ahead of them with Scott Wright, Oscar Cortez and Cyril Dessers. The Rangers bench: Kelly, Bodonakis, Ridvan, Matondo, Nsiala, Balogun, King, McCausland, and Danilo. Chris, I'll just come straight to you in your overall reaction to the team. I mean, I think there is a general sense that, well, it's not a general sense. Rangers pre-season performance-wise hasn't been good. It's clear a lot of work still has to be done on their squad, and that should improve things. But regardless of all of that, they could do with putting on a bit of a better performance today than we've seen over the last couple of weeks. I think it's fair to say.
I think it's fair to say that pre-season so far has not been encouraging. I think people expected more players to be in the squad or to come into the squad than they have done. I think we expected more to leave than have done already, and that's before you then start looking at the results and performances. Now, of course, it's not imperative at this stage of the season. Let's not read too much into performance at this stage. But I think the fans were rightly really upset by Wednesday night against Birmingham. It was not good. You almost give the team a bit of a pass in these early games, certainly the ones that we covered on the pre-season trip to Holland. They are just minutes and legs exercises, but we did say after both those games, by the time you get through these fixtures, and certainly we get to the latter couple, you're looking for a bit more from the side, both individually and collectively. I think we have to see that today. So a huge Rangers support went down to Birmingham in midweek. Disappointed to say the least in terms of the result and the performance. A decent crowd over here for this game in Berlin, and I say they will definitely be expecting, demanding, looking to see something from this Rangers side. Even if they don't win it over the course of 90 minutes, they're certainly looking for a bit more in terms of the structure, in terms of a bit more. Certainly some of those partnerships. I think it's the Barron Diomande one looks like being the one that's potentially going to start the campaign, certainly at Tynecastle next week. It's really interesting to see how they do against a good quality of opposition. Big afternoon for likes of Scott Wright, likes of Cortez, because there will be, also now with Tierney coming into the squad, you would assume he takes that right-sided berth. So there's definitely questions to still be answered by this Rangers side and this Rangers squad over the next week or so.
Yeah, a lot of comments coming in, Chris, about the absence. Pete Lawrence saying the absence of Dujon Sterling. I guess that's one that the manager will be asked upon post-match, because if you look at that starting 11 for me, and obviously Vaclav Cherny came into the club yesterday, still expecting a lot more in terms of ins and outs over the course of August. If you were to ask me, Chris, how many changes there will be between that team and the team that faces Hearts in less than a week's time, so it's a 12:30 kickoff next Saturday, isn't it? Still expect Ridvan to be at left back. I'd expect Sterling to be at right back if he's fit. The centre backs, Souttar and Davies have played together more often than not. You'd maybe see Leon Balogun come into that left-sided centre-back role, especially if it's an away game. It'll be Barron and Diomande. It'll be Lawrence because of the situation with Todd Cantwell. Ahead of them, would expect it to be probably McCausland instead of Wright. I don't think Danilo's going to be ready to start that game next week against Hearts. But I guess to throw it back to you on that point, Chris, you've been off a little bit over the last week and keeping up to date with everything from the news about Todd Cantwell to new arrivals to the fact that Connor Goldson is really close to having his Rangers exit confirmed. There's still so much change ongoing, and I guess Clement just needs to get a team that can get Rangers through that Hearts game and set up the season as successfully as is possible until there is more quality brought in before the end of August. And that starts next week against Hearts. But again, to go back to a point I made to you a few a few minutes ago, they could do with. I expected it to be a kind of full strength starting 11, if you will, today with Ridvan Yilmaz in there, with probably McCausland in ahead of Wright, although Wright did score in midweek against Birmingham. I don't think that's going to be the team that faces Hearts, but it's clear, regardless of whether it is or not, this shouldn't be the Rangers' strongest 11 going into the season. It's just, I guess, it's still going to be a case of make and do until the numbers are in the door for Clement to get, I guess, a starting 11 that he favours slightly more than the situation he's been handed this summer.
I think it's a team this afternoon that's probably been a pre-season in general that shows the good points of this Rangers squad. It shows where the good players are. Butland, obviously, the midfield, Barron, Diomande we've spoke about, but it also shows the weaknesses of it. You mentioned Tom Lawrence and the Todd Cantwell situation. Number 10 is now a glaring issue within this squad. Number 9 is an even bigger issue because Dessers, we've spoken so much about him over the course of Rangers' career. I see some comments coming in, people wondering where Hamza Igamana is. The manager has addressed that, both with us out in Holland and obviously after going back as well. He's laid that out to say that he's not at the level yet. So you're going into Tynecastle, unless something dramatic happens over the next few days, they're going into Tynecastle with Cyril Dessers starting. I don't see how Danilo gets the nod at Tynecastle. So I think you can see some good parts of this squad, but there's definitely some weaknesses in there. There's definitely some areas that do need improving. I think, as the manager has addressed, some of that will come later in the window. Some of it will require players to move on. Again, that's something else that you and the boys touched on a lot last week about having to shift players on. There's players in that team today, and there's players on the bench who, in an ideal world, will not be Rangers players come the end of the window. Until that stage, until those deals are done in and out, the manager has to make do. He has to try and get the best out of what he's got.
Yeah, I think that sounds like one of the teams is coming out there in Berlin, Chris. Topic of conversation as well in the comments is Vaclav Cherney. Aldo asking, where is Cherney? Thought he would be on the bench. At least a couple more people inquiring as to where Rangers' new signing is. Believe he hasn't travelled with the team, Chris, unless you can tell me differently. Obviously, he was only confirmed yesterday's signing. He was at Ibrox doing his interview and all the normal things that happens when a player comes to the club. Obviously, you weren't on yesterday, Chris. So we didn't really get your reaction to that signing. We've got a piece on the website with one of his former managers who was with him at FC20 for 3 seasons. Some interesting insight into what he's like as a player, especially that 2022-23 season, which earned him the move to the Bundesliga. A right-sided player, Chris, with a left foot is something that Rangers have needed for quite a while, I think, not least to give them balance, but a real first-choice option on the right. We've said about Ross McCausland, I think ideally for where he is at in his career, he'd be someone who would come in and challenge a starting player ahead of him and maybe play a number of games instead of being the first choice out-and-out player in that position. I don't think he's ready for that. I mean, what do you make of the signing? Because Rangers have needed a few more, especially if you look at the start of the window. They've needed a few more players who are maybe in their mid-20s, have got a bit more experience. And I guess the question about Cherney is going to be, can he replicate the form that earned him a move to the Bundesliga? Now, it was only a year ago. It's not as if this was something that happened 4 or 5 years ago and Rangers are banking on that form, but he's probably going to have to play relatively quickly, depending on the situation on either wing, because that is an area that since Clement came into the club, he's just not had enough depth or quality there, quite simply.
I think it's, as you mentioned there, Josh, it's an area that has needed proper reinforcement and properly addressed for not just over the last season, over the last year, for several seasons now. And the Rangers have been crying out for proper reinforcements in those wide areas. And Sima came in last season, did a great job from that left-hand side, but there was that balance was never then there, because the right side, it was people filling in at times, like John Sterling going in there. Ross McCausland, you spoke about, had a good breakthrough season, but it's a lot to ask him to go in there and really have the same impact that Sima was having on the other side. That right-sided position, it needed strengthening. Cherney looks a really interesting option there. Don't know too much about him apart from what we've read and what we've had on the site over the last couple of days. There's still, it will take him time, obviously, to settle in, to get up to speed. But I think there's an expectation that he is one who settles far more quickly than others. I think, as I mentioned, Igamana You're looking at, like, Hefty perhaps falls into that category. There's signings that have been made who you are willing to give that a bit of leeway to, almost, that you're willing to give them a wee bit of time to settle in, to get used to the club and the country and the squad and that type of thing. There's other ones, there's an expectation and a demand that you have to come in and you have to be an important player for Rangers very early on in your career. Certainly falls into that category. Now, Rangers need someone to come in and make an impact. We need numbers. They need a proper end product from that right hand side, and hopefully he's the man to deliver it.
Yeah, Chris, loads of people are asking when is there going to be more signings, obviously with that first game of the season edging ever closer. Sam Lammers left the club for FC20 last night in an initial fee around 2.5 million euros that should increase. I believe there's some add-ons that are more achievable than others, but there's a belief that could increase a fair bit in terms of that overall fee, which Rangers, I'm sure, will be happy with. We know that Todd Cantwell is asked to leave the club, which is just another narrative in this summer, which has too many to keep up with. Connor Goldson is going to move to Aris, and that move will be confirmed soon. Cherney was very much a move. If you remember, Chris, a few weeks ago, I think it was on Rangers TV, and Clement effectively said, "Look, the window. I know everyone wants it to be done now. The reality is it can't be, and we're discussing that in relation to him picking the best team that he can at the moment." But he said, "Look, there's a number of players that we do have agreements with. It's about then agreeing things with the club and having the funds in the first place to go out and buy them." And with Goldson soon to depart, with Lammers now having gone, with Todd Cantwell on his way out of Ibrox as well, these should only speed up the incomings that Rangers need. Is that what you expect over the next 7 days? Do you expect there to be another signing in place or two alongside Václav Cherney when Rangers do travel across the M8 to play Hearts next Saturday?
I think if you look at the mood amongst the fans over these last couple of weeks, another couple of signings would definitely give people a real lift and give them a bit more optimism heading into that Hearts game. I said right at the top of the show, I expected Rangers to have done a couple more by this stage, but I think it's always been in your mind that they would have to be patient. It's not an exact science. It's not an easy thing to do when you require a rebuild on this scale. When you require as many players in, as many players out, you need the dominoes to fall in the right order. I certainly in terms of the wages, against a point we've spoke about all throughout the window. Rangers cannot carry a squad of 40 plus players. It doesn't make any sense in football terms. Certainly doesn't make sense financially. You look at the players that have left and that will leave. There's a lot of wages have been freed up. The wage bill has grown in the last few seasons. The return on that has not been there. The return on that has to improve, and that's why it will take time for the manager and Neil Scotland to go through the final stages of this rebuild. So as you look at some of the guys that have left, the 5 at the end of their contracts, at the end of the season, that freed up a bit. That then allowed the first wave, if you like, of players to come through. You're then looking at Lammers as not a huge earner, but a big enough earner within the squad. It's going to make a big impact. Goldson obviously moved on. We know that deal will be announced next week. There's a Tavernier situation. Cantwell's not on a small wage either, and there's then other guys in that squad that we do believe are dispensable. Right? There's other guys within this group that will, in an ideal world, move on. Again, that then allows the manager, Neil Scotland, money to reinvest, to recycle, to make this squad a bit more fit for purpose.
Yeah, listen, Chris, we're going to let you go because the music, as ever happens at these games, the music gets gradually louder as these pre-match videos goes on. But give us a sense of what it's been like in Berlin so far. The stadium, I think it's the home of Union Berlin, where this game is at. It's obviously got quite a good reputation for its home atmosphere, that ground, if memory serves me. Give us a bit of a sense of maybe what the atmosphere has been like so far, how many Rangers supporters have made the trip over, and also what people can expect post-match, because obviously we'll be hearing from Philippe Clement and the player out there in Berlin ahead of the Hearts game. Probably be the last chance you hear from them, I guess, ahead of the pre-match press conference, which is next Friday.
The away end, just down to my right, is it's steadily filling up. Rangers fans in good voice already, but I think they're going to be drowned out by this home support. They gathered really early here as we walked through from the main reception after collecting their passes. There's families here, there's people having beers. There's just a really good vibe about it. It's a very typical German scene. So I don't think the locals here are treating this as a meaningless game. They've turned up in their numbers. It's a lovely day here, so hopefully it's a good afternoon for it. It's a wee bit wet earlier on, but the pitch looks in good condition. We just need Rangers to turn up and do their particular bit now, which is always, as we do all too well, that's always the hardest bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, it's going to be a tough test, I'm sure, but they do need to go and show a better face today. I think that's pretty clear, regardless of all the caveats and the fact that Clermont needs more quality, and we still expect the strongest starting 11, say in a month's time, to be very different from that one today. Rangers have a few big games to win in the next couple of weeks, and today will be a good indicator of just how ready they are for that. We're going to have full coverage for you. We'll be back at some point after the game, maybe about an hour and a half after kickoff, after Chris has spoken to Philippe Clermont. Stay up to date with us on all our socials for your instant reaction and analysis from the game and all the continued best Rangers coverage as we head into another busy season. But until then, enjoy the game wherever you're watching it. We'll speak to you later. Bye for now.